Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My name is Abdullah McIntosh. I am now a Muslim. I was born in London, UK in 1979, about 30 years ago. My family, I have quite a small family, relatively speaking. My father is retired. He's of no particular religious affiliation. My mother is a housewife and she is a practicing Christian. I have two brothers and a grandparent and two uncles. I received a good education in London, in around South London, Surrey, all my life. I lived there most of my life, and then I went to university in England, and I completed my studies when I was about 22. So now I'm going to tell you a little bit more about how I became a Muslim and my journey to Islam.
A regular English guy, Abdullah was brought up in South London in a Christian home. He had a dream when he was young. He wanted to be the richest man in the world. He followed this dream.
Having left school, my journey began. And the first part of my journey was not to do with religion, it was to do with, in fact, materialism. And I wanted to become a rich man, as everybody does in this time. So I was going to pursue my dream. So the first thing I did was I got a job in the city of London in one of the big banks, and I started to earn some money.
Abdullah's dream for great worldly success took him to Malaysia at the young age of 18. Malaysia is between India and China. It is predominantly a Muslim country. It was here that he had his first taste of independence and heard something that was to stay in his mind.
Having completed 6 months there, I wanted to extend that and pursue my dream further. And I was thinking that India and China were going to be the big wealthy nations in the future, and that's where I could make the money. That's where I could start to have my own business and become the big fat cat that I wanted to be. So in between India and China there is Malaysia, so I thought this is the perfect place. This is the place where the Indians will be and the Chinese will be. I can make some contacts there and then I can start the business. So I flew over there. I was only 18 years old, flew over there on my own, and I managed to secure a good job there, and it was my first taste of freedom. I had no one there, I had my own flat, I bought a motorbike, and I was free. I was free to do as I like. So I made some friends there in the beginning, and we used to play football behind the house every day after work. We'd all gather together, all different Chinese and Indians, and we'd play football. And at this time, it was the time of Maghrib. So at the time of Maghrib, of course, there is the call to prayers, the adhan. And I used to hear it every day. And I hadn't realized that it had affected me. For me, it was just something different. It was something like the Chinese that were there, they were doing their Tai Chi in the mornings, and that was obviously very different. And so the adhan at that time was just something strange, something new.
Abdullah had been deeply affected by his stay in Malaysia, but he didn't realize just how much until he was watching television 6 months later back in London. Many of the questions and dilemmas he had been thinking about since his younger years were addressed by an interesting-looking man on a TV show.
I think it was really reminding me about the good time, the pleasurable time that I did have in Malaysia. There wasn't really a religious connection at that stage, and this was all to change right now as I heard the adhan, the call to prayers, and afterwards a sheikh, Islamic, if you like, priest came on straight after the adhan and started talking. And he was talking really about general subjects, and he was talking, specifically about the problems in society and the purpose of life, the sort of philosophical questions, and obviously that related strongly back to me and my teenage years and my childhood years. in which I'd done a lot of thinking about these things. And there I was sitting there, English guy, sort of obviously fairly conscious about these sort of ideas, having them answered by an Islamic priest or a sheikh, as he's called. He wears a turban and he has a beard, and I've never really seen a turban and a beard, even when I was living in Malaysia. So it was a powerful thing. He was really answering some of the big philosophical questions, obviously, that we all have.
Despite the horror of 9/11 and the negative images of Islam and Muslims, Abdullah was sure that Muslims were not really like that. He had lived among them, he knew them. He was so drawn toward Islam that he wanted to feel that he belonged. So even before learning the rules of the fast, Abdullah attempted to fast in Ramadan.
I was remembering Islam and I was remembering the adhan again, and I opened up the television again and I started watching the TV and learning a bit more about Islam. And then September the 11th happened, and I increased my zeal for Islam. And I started to learn a little bit more, and I started to leave some of the bad things. I stopped eating pork, and I started trying to pray. I even remember putting my head down to make my first bow or my sajda to Allah in my own bedroom without any guidance. And very quickly after September 11th, Ramadan came. So I wanted to fast Ramadan, and I tried to fast Ramadan. Of course I didn't know anything about the rules, so I was drinking water. And I had a job at this time. I was learning to teach English, and I had some students there. And of course I was drinking in Ramadan, and I was drinking obviously because I was very hungry and very thirsty in Ramadan. It's my first Ramadan. And one of my students came to me and said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, actually, I'm trying to fast Ramadan." They said, No, you're not allowed to drink water.
The month of Ramadan is a very special time for Muslims. It was the month in which the Quran was revealed, and Allah specified in His book that Muslims should fast the entire month from sunrise till sunset. During this blessed time, the devils are chained, rewards are given without measure, mercy abounds, and forgiveness is there for the taking.
So she came to me and she said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I'm trying to fast Ramadan." So she told me she was a Muslim, etc., etc. And later along, she came and she told me that she had a gift for me. So she gave me a cassette and the Quran. And I took the cassette home and the Quran, and I put it in my desk and I left it in my bedroom. And I used to listen to music as I was going to bed to sort of soothe me to sleep, if you like. And this time, one day I came back and I thought, well, look, why don't I listen to this cassette? So I got ready for bed, and I got my speaker ready by the side of my bed, and I decided, right, I'm going to press play now and see what this was all about, expecting that it was going to be something like music.
ألف لام را تلك آيات الكتاب المبين إنا أنزلناه قرآنا عربيا لعلكم تعقلون.
So there it was, and I remember it so distinctly as I lay there in that it was completely dark, as obviously I was going to sleep. And the words of this, I wouldn't call it music, but the words of it I remember it hitting my ear and literally going down inside me and sort of filling my heart, and it filled it with a completely new, different emotion. Very difficult to describe, but I would describe it as like an electrical shock to the heart that just woke me up from whatever sleep I was in.
Once again, leaving behind the city he knew so well, Abdullah took off to Latin America. He was seeking the answers to his many questions and surrounding himself with the beauty of nature that ignites the spirit and deepens one's perception. With many things yet to change in his life, Abdullah kept a copy of the meanings of the Quran inside his backpack. Was he ready to make the necessary changes? Well, one day he opened the book and was in for a shock.
So having prepared myself in England and got ready for my trip to Mexico to learn Spanish, I flew over 5,000 miles across the Atlantic and I left England behind. But I carried with me in my bag the Quran. So on the second night that I was there, I took some time for myself and I just thought, there's something about this book that I'm attracted to. Maybe there's some wisdom in it. And I've always liked small books that contain some sort of wisdom, some sort of guide. So on the second night I opened up the Quran and I started to read it in English. And it had a very clear message. It was saying, if you continue to live your life as you are continuing at the moment, you are going to go to the fire of hell. I was shocked. So I took it upon myself and I said, I'm not ready. I'm not ready to change. I'm not ready to change my life. But I know it's the truth. I know it's the truth. So I took the Quran, not wanting to change my life, and I took my big bag and I took the Quran and I put it right to the bottom of my bag so that I didn't see it. I didn't want to see it. It was telling me the truth about my life. I was committing sins. So I took the book and I put it right to the bottom of my bag and I said to myself, I am covering the truth. It was like I was covering the truth. I was putting it right to the bottom of all my clothes and everything else. I didn't want to see it. I didn't want to know the truth. I wanted to carry on my life as I was living. Especially that I come all this way to Mexico to enjoy myself. And I told myself that, no, you've come all the way here to enjoy yourself. A bit like we do, you know, go on, enjoy yourself. So I left Mexico City and I went on my journey and I traveled backpacking around Mexico for 6 months.
Mexico was a place for enjoyment. The beautiful landscape, the amazing sunsets held Abdullah in awe. But he was soon to see its magnificence as well as its harshness and destruction. It was a time to think and rethink the direction his life was taking.
I saw the beauty of what was over there. I mean, the natural beauty that was there. It was the first time I'd really been exposed to the beauty of a place. I saw the sunset and I used to sit on the beach and I used to think, this is amazing. I'm really, truly in awe of whatever or whoever had put the sun there and made it set, and whoever had raised the mountains. And I was climbing up volcanoes and I'd look up the top of the volcanoes and look across the land and think, this is just awesome. And I'd sat in waterfalls in the middle of the jungle and I used to sit there just reflecting on, you know, just the beauty of the place. And it really touched me and it really started to change me. And I started to want to sin less and I started to want to do good to people. And I love to do good to people. And people used to say to me, you're very kind and you're this and that. And I was just enjoying myself, really serving people and doing good deeds. So this really affected me and I was very peace inside. In fact, I had a lot of peace inside my heart. And then after about 6 months, I came to the city and I got a job. And I went from being a traveller with a backpack to being settled in a rented house with a kind of suit and everything like that. And I became an English teacher. And 2 weeks after I settled there, a huge hurricane came across the Atlantic and it hit Mexico City. I'm sorry, not Mexico City, Merida, in Mexico. And it literally uprooted all of these trees and these buildings and just flattened the place. And I was shocked. I mean, I'd never experienced anything like it before. I mean, maybe when I was a bit younger, but I'd never experienced such an intense hurricane of 150 mile an hour winds and I was just in a small shack, and I was, you know, it was overwhelming. So something happened, and something changed inside myself, and I no longer had this feeling of peace. After the hurricane came and went, the whole peace and the whole love and the whole the good feelings that I was having disappeared, and I was lost. And suddenly all these problems started appearing in Mexico, and I tried to deal with them, but I'd had enough. I'd been in Mexico for 9 months, and I decided to cut my journey short. I thought to myself, I don't want to stay here anymore. I want to travel back to England, and if I travel back to England, everything's going to be okay.
Abdullah returned to England and found himself surrounded by many kinds of problems, and the feeling of peace he sought eluded him. He went back to his old habits. The more he tried to be his old self, the more dissatisfied he became. He found a sense of emptiness in what he was doing, and there was certainly no happiness.
So I decided to cut my trip short, and I decided to change my ticket from a 1-year trip to a 9-month trip. So I was keen to go back. I thought if I go back now, you know, I'll leave Mexico behind and these problems, and I'll go back home and I'll settle in, and all the aggravation that I felt would just disappear. So I flew all the way back to England, and as I got back, I realised that these problems hadn't gone away, and there were even more problems. Everywhere I looked in my life, there was a problem here and a problem there, and all I wanted was just this peace, this feeling that I had of peace and closeness to the creation. All I wanted was that peace in my heart, and I couldn't find it. I went back to my old behaviours. I was going out with my friends. I was drinking alcohol as you do. I was watching football, and every time I did these things, I've asked myself at the end, you know, is my happiness here? Is my happiness really here? And I remember looking one time at the bottom of my glass and thinking, I've just drank my drink, and happiness is not here for me. I just wanted to have that feeling. So I carried on. I tried to fit in again and fit in with my old behaviours and the general behaviours that people have in Europe. And the more I tried to fit in, the more I tried to be my old self, the more unhappy I became. So what I did was I carried on, and eventually I got to the point where I was lost, and I didn't know where to go anymore. I just wanted to have that peace and that feeling again. So eventually I started to read the Bible, and in the Bible I read a few nice things, and there was a few good words, and of course I respect the book, but it wasn't changing. It wasn't changing my life. And then after all those years, about 3 years, I brought out the same Quran that I put all the way in the bottom of the bag, and I had it on my bookshelf, and I got out this Quran and I started reading it in English again, and this time I read it and read it and read it, and after all what I'd experienced in Mexico, I understood exactly what it was saying. It was saying, look into the creation of the heavens and earth and see who possibly could have created that. Is there any man who could have created that but the hand of God, or hand of Allah? So I reflected, and I was answering the questions. I was asking myself, who knows the mystery that's in the heavens and the earth? And the Quran would reply to me, and there the answer would be in the book, in the Quran. The mystery of the heavens and earth is with Allah. And when I was reading these verses, I totally understood, because I'd been through the journey, the very journey that the Quran, the very instructions that the Quran was ordering me to do, that look and reflect on the creation and think, why are we here? What are we doing? Who created this? Is there something more? And I realized that yes, this is it. I understood. This is changing my life. This was filling my heart with comfort and peace. Just reading the words in English was filling my heart with comfort and peace, and I'd understood now what it was asking from me. So I read the Quran, and I loved it so much. And after a few months, I was saying to myself, surely Allah or God exists. So one day I got on the tube, and I was asking myself, surely, it was on a Friday actually, and I was asking myself, surely Allah exists. So I went to ask on the tube, I got on the tube and I went to ask, I saw a blind couple, and I thought to myself, well look, I'm going to ask them if they believe in God or not. And so I went across them, because I thought surely, they are blind, they must believe in something. So I went to them and I said, look, excuse me, I hope you don't mind me asking you, but I want to ask you a quite serious question. They said, no problem. I said, look, do you believe in God? And they shook their heads, and they said, almost, they didn't really say anything, and they quickly hurried off the train. So I was confused, and I was thinking, what's this? How can I be thinking that God exists, and these people who are blind, they don't believe in God? So I went a few more stops down the way on the tube, and a Malaysian couple arrived on the tube, and I saw the male and the female, and she was in hijab, the cover of the Muslims, and I thought, surely these people know what I'm talking about. So I went to them, not really thinking that they were Muslims, but I went to them and I said, look, this is what I think and this is my opinion, what are your thoughts? And they said, yes, this is what we believe, we understand what you're saying. And then he said to me, I think we better get you to the masjid, I think we better get you to the mosque. So I said, yes. So we stepped off the platform at Hyde Park Corner, I remember it very well, Piccadilly line exactly, and I started crying, because it was at that point that I realised that I'd been through a 7-year journey. It was a 7-year journey of ups and downs and happiness and sadness and anxiety and all the other emotions. And at that point I realised I had to become a Muslim. There was no choice. I couldn't go on living without this peace in my heart, and I knew that the answer lay in the Quran and the answer lay in Islam. So we went to the big mosque in Regent's Park in London, and I said the Shahada, which in Arabic is Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh.
A journey to end all journeys. Many changes to initiate one final turning point. The story of a man's search to discover the meaning of life and all its ups and downs. His search for inner peace and to understand the way to make positive change in the world.
So after Islam, my life has changed. But, we have to live life. We live in the modern world, so the exterior hasn't really changed that much. In the beginning I still used to go to the office and still used to go to the job and have the 9 to 5. So my life didn't really change that much, but what changed in me was inside, in my heart. It really changed the way I dealt with people. I started to treat people in a good way. I wanted to do good things. I wanted to do good to people. I started to respect my parents properly, to treat them in a good way, to really love them. And many aspects, I've started to live a clean life without the things that we do, like smoking and drinking and these things. And really it's made me a better person, and it's made me content, and it's helped my understanding of the nature of things and the nature of the world. Because in the Quran it shows us so many things about our relationships between each other and our relationships between us and our creation and us and our Creator. And once we understand these things, you become satisfied and you have an understanding of a spiritual existence. And in actual fact, this is what we need these days today. And that is, we need to wake up and realize that, look, this life isn't just about material wealth and money and having a good time. There's something else out there for people who are looking, for people who are searching, for people who are not happy with the way things are. And the transformation, the change in the world that everybody wants to see doesn't come from outside. The change in the world comes from inside. And the change in the world comes from when you recognize that there is a creator. There is something bigger than the universe. There is something that has put all of these things into a balance and has set the balance. And it's that being that we need to worship. And when we start worshipping that being, all other things in our life fall into place. And we become pleasant people, we become better people, we become more human. We work with mercy between us, as we should have, and as all the prophets have shown us in the years in the existence of mankind. So this is the real transformation that we should be looking for. We should be looking beyond materialism, beyond our 9 to 5, beyond our computer and our television and all these things, and to really think. And when in that thinking and in that ability to think, then you really start living. You're not living someone else's life on the television or in a film. You're living your life. You're going through real experiences and emotions to get to the truth. And the truth is that there is one God, He is Allah, and we should worship Him.